Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Hi, Barry. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again today.
So following on from last episode where you mentioned and dropped a hint of upcoming attractions, we decided to do it today.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. My brain tends to work like that. So last time we talked, we were talking about overcoming limiting beliefs, and we shared, and I think I shared that one of mine had been, public speaking, but it actually went even a little deeper than public speaking. For me, it was very much about never putting myself out there again. It was really never being visible. And I had an experience as a child that I will share here, where I absolutely can pinpoint that was a day where I said, I will never, ever make a fool of myself again. I will never put myself out there in front of people where they can laugh at me. And I think most people that have listened by now know my childhood and how I grew up, and I my father never acknowledged me as his child, and I really really became into my awareness when I was 5 years old, and I started attending the village school where he lived. So I passed him on my way to school, and he would always I'd like sometimes see him standing on his front doorstep, and I'd look in his direction, just hoping our eyes were going to meet, and they never did. And I would play a game at school, and I would spin around in the playground, just hoping he was peeking through the fence at me, and he was never there. And so this was, a really sort of painful thing of me, because I just really truly believe that every father, and especially when I talk to the other children at school, they all seem to have fathers that lived at home with them and in houses where they had dinners together and things like that. And I really realized that I did not have that normal childhood. So anyway, I was just barely 5 years old, had probably been at school a very short time, but really feeling this loss of not having this man acknowledge me, and the sort of envy at all the other kids that had fathers. So one day, Mrs. Roberts, Mrs. Roberts, our school teacher, said, "Get dressed up nicely tomorrow. We've got a special visitor." So the next day, we, all were told to sit in a little circle around a chair, and that this special visitor was going to be coming to talk to us. Anyway, this really lovely looking man came through the door, and he was dressed in a suit, and I thought it was my father. I thought he'd got out of his mechanic's overalls and got all dressed up in a suit to come and tell the other kids that he was my father. So I'm eagerly sitting in this little circle around this chair. We're on the floor as 5-year-olds, and this man is sitting on the chair. And I was so eager for him to just tell everybody who was my father. So at one point, I sort of did a little doggy act, and I got on all fours, and I sort of, crawled over to him, crawled up on his lap. I think I licked his face and told the whole class that he was my father that come to visit. And this very nice man did not push me off his knee. He didn't do anything. He just probably sat there not knowing what the hell to do. But after he left, Mrs. Roberts let me know very clearly, both verbally and physically, that I had embarrassed this nice man because I was a little bee, and she took me into the cloakroom, and she grabbed me by the hand, and she swung me around and around, and then let go of me. And I remember flying through the air and hitting my back on a steel post that was holding up the sink. And that winded me, and I couldn't breathe. And I remember lying there on the floor thinking, I'm going to die. I can't get air into my lungs. And all the other kids are laughing. And I remember thinking in that moment, I will never, ever risk this again. I mean, it literally felt like I was going to die. I mean, truly, that's how I felt. If I put myself out there, if I am that visible, like being on almost like on a stage, then the fallout of that could be life-threatening. And so I just became very introvert and very didn't want to risk that ever again. And that's what I really saw, that I had kept that story alive. And, maybe as a child it was necessary, but it's certainly, and maybe as a teenager it was necessary given the circumstances of how we lived in a home, an aftercare home, for residential aftercare home for the people with mental disabilities. There was safety in not being seen there too. But to carry that on through my life and never question it, and I knew where it came from. I was aware of it, but I didn't question it. And what we're talking about today is shame, and it was shame that kept me shut down in that way. Shame around having, embarrassed this nice man. Shame about the circumstances of my birth. Shame about everything, and I let that shame absolutely run my life for, as I say, I'm 64, so that's a long time. That is, 2/3 of my life. Hopefully, if I get to live the long life that women in my family tend to live, but that's 2/3 of my life that I've let that shame hold me back. So that's what I really want to talk about today is shame. How is that holding you back? And really, did I have anything to be ashamed of? I was a 5-year-old. I was an innocent little child. It's not like I did something as an adult that I had to go to prison for. It was just just an innocence of a child, but we carry that with us, and we let it dictate our lives. So, shame, Barry.
Follow,
What can
follow
you talk to?
that.
What was that?
Well, I say, how can I follow that? I'm just thinking back on. I'm just because I know we're telling stories at this point. We'll talk about the solution in a minute. The only thing I'm thinking of is looking back at my own childhood and upbringing was a couple of instances I remember vividly where I felt ashamed. One for myself, then one for my family. One, and this is nothing to the degree that you went through, but the thing I want to say about shame is it doesn't have a scale or a spectrum.
Yeah,
We can feel
and
ashamed
and
on
and
any level, from something small to large.
absolutely, and
Sorry,
we're
after you.
never in comparison. People's experiences are their
Right,
experiences, and there's no better or less than your feelings are warranted, and you never have to compare yourself to others. So absolutely.
right. So one instance that I remember very vividly now, although I'm trying to remember, I was about 8 or 9 at the time, was I decided that I was fixated on Pez dispensers. That was one of my things when I was a young kid. I wanted one of those things because it was mechanical, it was cool, it was like physical, it was very very engineering thing, and
Mhm.
I couldn't get one. Like, I wasn't able to get one, wasn't allowed to have one. Whatever. I can't remember the reason why I didn't get one, from pocket money.
Mhm.
But I stole one out of a candy store, a sweet store back in England.
Yeah.
And I remember coming home and being kind of bold about it so that my dad saw me with it and he knew I
Mm.
hadn't bought it. And so he, in no uncertain terms, told me I had to take it back. I had to tell the shopkeeper that I basically had stolen it and to give it back and take the punishment, whatever it was. I was so ashamed that I'd been caught in the act that I was actually not willing to take it back. I actually buried it in the garden. So I was done.
This is
So
such
it's
a
in
good
my hands.
story.
No, but it's like, as I'm saying, it's like this thing about shame. It comes in different ways, different
Yeah.
flavors. And so for me, that experience and back then, first of all, I never did go back to the shopkeeper. I lied to
Mm.
my dad that I had. I mean, I compounded this one simple quote mistake with a
Mhm.
multitude of layers of coatings of paint to hide it, to um, pretend it didn't happen or to make it look like it was complete. But I
Mm.
carried that for a while. And the
Mm.
thing for me was ultimately, and this is the thing that's interesting, I won't say it's the reason why, but it certainly has made me very honest in my shopping and interactions. Like, if I get something, I've gotten deals before, but if I get something where I walked out the store and like they didn't register something, I'll take it back and make sure it's okay. Like, this part of me is wired that way now because I have to make up for that guilt, what I carried
Yeah.
from back then. So it has that benefit in a sense.
Yeah.
The other incident about shame, and this has actually happened in my teens, and it wasn't, and it's funny because, and I talk about this thing in my work about how shame and blame are two sides of the same coin in a way. Because
Mm.
shame is internal, whereas blame is external in a sense, and we blame other people, but we feel shame ourselves. And something happened in my teens where my dad did something at work that got him in trouble. And his act, and what happened was my mum got so upset because he was the breadwinner. My mum
Mm.
was going like, how dare he risk the income of the family by doing something so stupid? And I got so, and it's interesting, I took it on personally for some degree, even though it wasn't me that did it, it was my dad that did it. But I felt ashamed of our family because something
Yeah.
like that had happened.
Yeah.
Now, the good news was everything worked out, we were fine. But the moment in time that happened, that interval stuck in my head, and it got in the way of me in a lot of ways moving forward. So shame has, again, different flavors, different aspects, different scales, different magnitudes, but it has a way of getting inside of us, and it can hold us back from living a life fully.
Mm.
So you were saying exactly the same thing. The impact on your life was very evident,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know.
But I
So
want to go back to something you just said because it's really, really important too. We often, as young children, do take on our parents' shame. We just do.
yeah,
It's not even we're consciously going, oh well, it's it's our family. Is we we feel that shame that our parents feel, and it
yeah,
can sometimes we pick up on it and we internalize it, and we had nothing to do with it. So I know for
exactly.
me, it was exactly the same thing. I had shame around, the circumstances of my birth. Um, I just did. I
But you
don't
had
think
no
my
control over it.
I had no control over it, but I led my life in a very moral way, to make up for the embarrassment of the acts of my parents. I was like, well, I've nothing to do with that. I don't do that, and I was being reactive to it because it was so painful as a child, with this sort of public shame that I again protected myself, just like you said you did. You became very to avoid ever being in that situation again, you became squeaky clean. Barry's not going to nick the what's the
It's true.
headstones, and I was
It's
going to
like
be
funny.
the same. I was like, and I wanted to avoid shame too. I mean, I was talking about it
Mhm.
with my son over the weekend. He was confessing to a few of the things he did as a teenager, and I was like, God, I never stole candy from the sweet shop. I
Mhm.
I was the good little girl. Um, because again, it's like my bucket could not contain any more shame. It was like I better avoid it at all
Yeah,
costs. I think my
absolutely.
sister, even when we would scrump apples, I would she'd run away, and I'd like the farmer would be there, and I'd be just standing there, like with the apples in my hand, and probably peed my pants out of
Frozen.
fear, and didn't run and didn't do
Yeah,
anything. So it's just interesting. It's so interesting. But again, what you were saying, I love what you said about shame being the other side of the coin of blame. But also, I
yeah,
just would give a little, you know, what we say about shame. Shame is not about an action we've done. That's sort of like embarrassment. That's regret. There's all those things. Shame is a deep seated belief that it's not that we did something wrong, it's that we are wrong. There's something wrong with us. And that's the
yeah,
difference. That toxic shame of we are, you know, basically born different or faulty, or there's something wrong with us internally that can never be fixed. And as we all know, and going on to the, as you were saying, the examples of how to overcome that, when we realize that at our essence, it doesn't matter what's happened to us as children. And certainly there was more than just that example I shared. And a lot of times when we've been abused sexually, we often feel shame about that too. We feel that it was our
yeah,
fault, we asked for it, we made it happen. But when we realize that we are these magnificent spiritual beings having this human experience, and that we are 99% spiritual, as I like to say, 1% human, and that's not to
mhm,
put down our humanness. It's our humanness is fabulous and wonderful, and there's no spiritual bypass here. There's a reason we came down onto this earth to have the human experience. It's not to deny it and sort of walk around like this and keep doing the spiritual bypass. It's to But in situations like this, especially around shame, especially around abuse and abandonment and neglect, where we often blame ourselves, when we understand that whatever happened to us in the circumstances of our childhood, it may have impacted that physical child, that physical form. It has an impact on it, but it never broke our spirit. It never damaged us or broke who we are, our essence. And that is so much bigger than those events. And when we look in that direction, that's where we heal. And that's where we heal our shame, is to keep focusing on the spiritual truth of who we are. Then what we do is we get to reparent that beautiful, innocent little child and, lovingly protect them and nurture them and love them and give them what they didn't have as a child and
Hmm.
let them know that they are shameless. There's no shame in them. They don't do anything to ask for anything that happened. And when we reparent them that way, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience. And people heal. People heal from things that they don't think they could ever heal from.
One of the biggest gifts I feel like when we do this work, when I do this work, we do this work with our clients, is the experience of having them see the reality of what happened versus the illusion they've been carrying around for many years.
Mhm.
And to actually look through the lens of clarity and see their younger self being innocent of all charges, so to speak. They've been exonerated when they start seeing their child as themselves they really were, that what they took on as a belief system was totally false and not needed.
Mhm.
There's nothing to fix. It's really just a matter of saying, you know what, that's not you. You can let go of it. And the openness and the freedom that they experience is such a gift to witness and be a gift to serve, that they really do start to recognize that they are free to be shameless and free and whole again. Because they
Mhm.
never were anything but that, but they just believed they weren't. So
Exactly.
absolutely, it's vital.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I love what you're saying. We're not healing people, we're not fixing them, we're pointing them back to the truth of who they are, which is that they were always whole and complete. There was never anything wrong with them. And unfortunately, life can be very cruel at times, and things can happen in this, I call the physical world of form. And,
hmm,
we're not denying that. And we're not denying that. And that it takes some very deep work for some people that have suffered some horrendous trauma to really work through it, let it go, and focus on the health that's within all of us and the resilience. And so it's beautiful work, and it's very rewarding, as you said, and
yeah,
because we have hope for our clients. We know that nobody is beyond seeing something differently. When they look in a different direction,
right,
they see something differently. And that all that takes is saying, oh my God, I understand. It wasn't me. It's nothing to do with me. And
yeah,
often perpetrators, they're the ones that are shameless, and they're the ones that are sort of inflicting their shame because they won't admit their own shame onto that child. Then that's why the child feels it and absorbs this shameful feeling, is because it's come from the perpetrator. So,
yeah. In fact, the way I remember hearing it once in a seminar years ago, they talked about how only good people feel guilt and feel shame. Bad
mm,
people don't care.
yeah.
So it's like the sense of they joke about it's like a bad person's like, I killed him, I'll kill him again. It's like they have no fear, they have no what's the word,
Remorse.
repugnance. Yeah, they
Right.
don't they don't sense any sense of guilt, shame, or any of that stuff. They just go, I don't care. And
Mhm.
so, if you're carrying shame in your life, underneath it, you're a good person. So first of all, don't
Mhm.
judge yourself as a bad person because you are a good person, because only good people feel shame,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, it's so true, and I love you saying that because, yeah, as you know, a lot of my clients are dealing with, as well as childhood trauma, but codependency and narcissistic abuse. And I'll often get clients come to me and they'll say, "Do you think I'm a narcissist?" And I'm like, "The simple fact you're asking that shows me you're not a narcissist, because the
Right.
narcissist
Exactly.
is shameless. They would never self reflect like that. They always do what you said, which is the other side of the coin, which is to
Hmm.
blame everybody
Right.
for their actions and their behavior. And yes, as you said, they lack empathy. They do not have a conscience, and especially when you start getting into the sociopaths and the psychopaths, there is no conscience. People are just objects to use to serve them. They're often the abusers are narcissists. They see a child as just another thing to serve them. It doesn't occur to them that their behavior is, horrendously painful and damaging to a child. They just do what they do because it's all about
Hmm.
them serving their needs and themselves. So yes, it's a wonderful thing to, as you say, remind yourself. The simple fact that you carry shame means that you have a conscience, that you're a wonderful human being that has the ability to self-reflect and to look at their behaviors and go, is this appropriate? Is this damaging somebody else? Am I being selfish here to the point? Right? There's okay being taking care of yourself, but when it's to the point that you're hurting other people and treating them like objects, then it's good to have a conscience. So yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
very different between
one of the
shame
gifts we
and guilt.
absolutely one of the gifts we bring in a lot of ways is the altitude. It's like we bring a level of perception for the client where they can see themselves more clearly, because most people, we did ourselves when we're younger, can't see beyond our own limited viewpoint of the world. So we tend to um, see only the negative because that's what we're stuck in the middle of. And so to be able to step free of it, to step above, so to speak, and look down from a higher place, we can
Mhm,
see how finite and how limited and how almost insignificant the true shame is. That incident, that thing we've tied ourselves to. And when we see the difference between who we are and what that is, we can walk free of it so easily. That's the
mhm,
biggest gift. Again, like we talk about, we don't heal our clients, we just help them see themselves more clearly so they
mhm.
don't have that baggage anymore. That's what it
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, and what's coming up for me? I do this every show. It's like, oh, next show, and I'm really seeing is
Damn, I
forgiveness.
keep doing that.
Keep doing that. But I can see the next step is forgiveness. It is forgiveness. It's that because
Yeah,
we're right now we're basically saying, you know, you are not blameless, and I don't want to leave it with somebody just then feeling like, well, therefore I have to blame this person and this person, because
right,
yes, you give their shame back to them. um, Often they have come from a very damaged, hurt place too. It doesn't absolve what they did at all. You still can say this was totally unacceptable. But I also don't want people listening to get stuck in that, okay, um, taking that blame to the point where they're holding on to that burning rock and hurting themselves further. So that is another
right.
show that we will do about forgiveness, not only forgiveness of ourselves but others too. We know that one very well.
Yeah.
But back to shame again. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, again, that distinction between healthy embarrassment, healthy regret, um, um, all those things are healthy. Is what keeps us, being conscious sort of human beings and fellow walkers on this planet. That we have some type of inner compass that says, "Oops, you shouldn't have done that," or so it helps us take responsibility. But shame is a
Yeah.
whole bag of tricks. That one does not help anybody.
No, and it's a quagmire. It's almost like quicksand. You get sucked into it and you can't get out of it until you really, again, altitude. The thing is for me with shame is the number of people on the planet who carry that level of shame on some degree, some way, shape, or form is immense.
Mhm,
So anybody listening to this who feels like the only one feeling shame, sorry to burst your bubble, but truth is you're not alone, which is good news actually. But
mhm,
also there is hope for you. There is opportunity for you. And yeah, I agree with you that in the next episode, not this one, but certainly another episode, we'll talk about forgiveness, which is one of the biggest gifts, one of the biggest cures to what ails us in terms of emotional baggage and emotional wounding. So recognizing that shame is one of the pieces. There are other pieces too. We talked about, like I said earlier, about blame and shame being two sides of the same coin in a way. They are
mhm,
internal stuff we carry, but also we do carry stuff about other people. And forgiveness works for both. Again, we'll talk about that next time. I'm not going to get into it now. But a couple of things I want to throw in there as well is, and I talk about these, I've joked around saying these are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which is blame, shame, guilt, and resentment. Because all four of those things are either self inflicted or other inflicted that keep us separate and keep us hurt and keep us wounded.
mhm,
And shame is one of the biggest ones, which is why we're talking about it here. But I want to let people know there are other flavors of things we do to limit ourselves and wound ourselves. And shame perhaps is the biggest one of them all, because it is such a debilitating experience, an emotional experience.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it is. It's and it doesn't serve anyone. I mean, that's the thing.
No,
I mean, when you've genuinely done something wrong and you can own it and apologize and be free of it and carry on in your life, that's healthy, wonderful behavior. But shame is something. It's like
absolutely.
is that it sits within us. It's that pocket. It's festering, and it's doing is destroying you. It serves zero purpose whatsoever. Doesn't make you a better person. As we said, shameful people that feel ashamed are already great people because they actually have the ability to self-reflect and question their behavior. But yeah,
Hmm.
it does not serve anyone.
And the good news is that we can help you with that.
Yeah. So, anything else to add to this show, or is it going to be a teeny little shorter one
I
this
think
week?
that's.
I think we covered it.
I think there's enough. There's enough here for people to have food for thought, definitely, and definitely. I think there's going to be some questions that may come up with this. And by the way, just a quick aside: if you've listened to our podcast for a while and you have thoughts and ideas, or we've provoked questions in you, feel free to reach out to us and let us know. Because frankly, we don't want to speak. We're not speaking in a vacuum here.
Hmm.
What we're sharing, hopefully, it's landing for you, and you're getting insights and ideas. And if you have questions or thoughts, reach out to us. Let us know, because this one particularly can be an evocative topic.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Barry. That was another great conversation. And thank you, everyone else. It was lovely to have you join us again. And we will see you next week.
I mean, deal in need. Take care of yourselves.
Yes. Wonderful. Bye bye.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode fresh and shiny as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well. So go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.